Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream event for the Restitutor Orbis channel. I'm your host, Lucius Aurelian, and today we are going to be discussing the Institute, or the true holders of power in the land. I'd like to extend a welcome to all viewers joining us, all Prime Explorers, all Explorers, habitual viewers, and anybody else just logging on to join the channel for this interesting live stream exploration. So the first thing we're going to talk about the concept of our hierarchy, or a king of the world with the Battle of Ventry. Now, those of you who've been watching the channel for over a year may have heard of the Battle of Ventry. Channel members are familiar with it. It is a legendary battle that occurred in the distant history of Ireland, although it is stated to be myth, and interestingly enough, Irish myth is quite suppressed. But what's interesting of this particular battle to us? Well, it's a count that there was a king of the world. And indeed, many of us have the mentality that there is a king of the world. At least it may be a physical king, it could be a spiritual king, it could be some other mentality that we have that we're not entirely sure of. But oftentimes that's what's programmed into our minds, is that there's some sort of individual that's at the top of everything and pulling all the strings. And we have to go all the way back to myth to where there was really a king of the world, unless you're looking at the religious interpretation of it. So, what's that, Sean? Did they come from High Brazil? Well, they may have come from that direction, but if you're talking about the battle itself, the invasion force came from all over the land, all focused on Ireland. It's a very interesting account. So, yeah, it was quite an interesting account, because there's all sorts of interesting aspects that include travels of large armies, the fact that the rest of the world is unified against Ireland, and we'll just point it out here real quick and how it pertains to our exploration. So this is some artwork that's actually from a more recent book on it, and I have stated that the Irish myth, for whatever reason, is it actively suppressed? Is it just not interesting to people? I find it hard to believe it's not interesting to people, because it's in a lot of ways even more textured than Greek myth. I'm not saying it's better, it just has the same mentality of a development over time. And in short terms, the Battle of Ventry refers to the invasion of the king of the world, Daredon, pictured here, and all the other kings of all the other kingdoms that he's captured or conquered. And a very interesting depiction here of the entire land in a circle, not necessarily a globe, but whatever, it's a two-dimensional picture, so we can make whatever arguments we want to. And it shows that Daredon is irritated by the fact that there's only one land, Ireland, Hibernia, or whatever you want to call it, keep that in mind for later, that has resisted his rule. The rest of the lands have fallen to his rule, and if you actually go back and read this myth, you'll find all kinds of interesting allusions to more advanced technology, the logistical capacity to gather an army of unprecedented size, move it across the ocean, and invade Ireland. Indeed, it's stated that Daredon set up his initial headquarters at Skellig Michael, the island where they filmed the very intriguing Last Jedi film. I won't say anything more about that, but it's a very beautiful island, and naturally it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's one of the earliest explorations on this channel. And from there, Daredon met and engaged the Irish army, or the Fenian army, or the Fianna, or all the other different names that they have for it, led by a legendary Irish hero. I'm not going to go into it now because it's not part of the exploration, but it's a great story. I recommend the myth. But the reason I'm highlighting it now is we have the concept of a king of the world, Daredon. And in some way, shape, or form, that is the head of the institute, if you will. Whether it's a president, or whether it is a dictator, or an emperor, or all the other different names that we have for it, czar, every language that we have, it all amounts to the same thing. One individual who controls a larger group or elite group of leaders, and that's how the institute is facilitated and commanded. So what are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts about how that relates to our current situation in the land? No doubt it did, Paulie. No doubt that it did. Yes, Aaron or Ara, they have many different new names for it as well. Who knows what the original name was? Maybe it's something we've never even heard. Stopped off in Ireland for a Pepsi. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, Khan. That's a good example there, Jamie. Yes. At least I forget that. The Khan. The big capstone on the top. Yes, without a doubt. Lucian, huh? No, I'm not the guy from that Star Trek episode, but he was an interesting character too, now that you mention it. Ah, yes. Honor good kings, worship King of Kings. It does continue in many ways. Supposedly it does, but again, who knows what the actual lineage of languages is? Do we really know what the true lineage of languages is? Do we know which languages developed naturally or which languages were innovated? We've proven that anybody can invent a language with Klingonese and so forth. So that's all right. Good to see you, Battlestar Terra. What's that, Robert? There are many known kings of the world, but one unknown major king. And that very well could be true with how things are facilitated and run. Yep. And it's funny how many examples that you see of it, Paulie, whether it's, legitimate, considered legitimate, a government, a series of warlords, if you will, or watch Mad Max and you've got humongous, I mean, the original three Mad Maxes, but you have all kinds of different examples. Yeah, doesn't it? Very different land, and the exploration on it was quite interesting. So it's all good. It gave me a good laugh. Do you think Fleming's Spectre was based on something real? It's possible. Something real or something that somebody saw that we just don't know. Yeah, that's kind of my thought. Although it does seem like they're going in the right direction. So give them time, Paulie, right? Give them time. Well, and again, that's supposedly what we're told, that English is a universal language and that there's different variations of English, but again, we don't know. I mean, I can tell you beyond any shadow of a doubt that there's nobody who was alive in 1899 that we can talk to right now. So anything that happened before 1900, there's really nobody that can testify that they saw it firsthand. I mean, yes, if we read the books, sure. But moving on, looking at some of these other images, and there's some really intriguing artwork behind this great Battle of Ventry. You have a clash of the army on the Battle of Ventry Beach, and that was where the Fianna engaged and challenged the King of the World's army. They were vastly outnumbered, and oddly enough, when you look at the mythical account, it gives you very specific numbers. So very intriguing. And modern, supposedly, archaeologists, I know I don't like using that word, but I am in this case. Modern archaeologists have looked at the sites around Ventry, and there are a lot of burial sites, and there do seem to be an area, or it does seem to be an area where a great battle took place. I was always impressed, though, by the logistical feat of Daredon moving an army of such size across the ocean at that time. And it does hint to something of greater technology. And when you look at these pieces of artwork, you get that idea. Now, when they actually account for the battle, it does sound like it's a traditional, what we'd think of as a medieval battle, hand to hand, close quarter, swords and shields, spears. But then you have other strange things, such as the involvement of the Tuatha De Danann, or the figures who came to Ireland from a mythical lost civilization. And indeed, that's also relayed in the account of Ventry. And there's many different names for the novels and the stories, but by all means, I strongly suggest look it up and read it. It does give you this entire account of this battle and what the King of the World was really trying to do, and that was quite simply conquer the world, and was stopped at Ireland. Could this explain why there's potentially some disdain in the current age for Ireland? Maybe, although we could really say the same thing about every land and every people, depending on the day and the time and who's writing the article, right? So hard to say, hard to know. What I appreciate about this story, though, is that it does seem to give us a mentality of a different civilization. Indeed, the king of the world, his armies, the civilization that he's the head of, it seems to be very corrupted. I think somebody alluded to the use of dogmen or very horrific soldiers that were genetically or potentially altered through alchemical means to become different kinds of soldiers, or the cat-headed or dog-headed people. Yeah, who knows for sure? That's possible too. Yep, indeed. And it's amazing how many different variations there are. So things aren't quite as divided as we like to think. That's true, Kathy. So I guess you can't have a good jungle warfare school there, but we'll have one in Hawaii where there's no snakes either. Makes sense. Sorry, I just had to go there. Uh, Yes, and that seems to be something that's been attributed in modern perceptions. And of course, when you listen to the music in certain movies, I'm not going to name any films. Okay, maybe The Departed. They try to convey that and try to convey that mentality. Yeah, that's a good way to say it, RB. No doubt weird in the past and weird in the present, and it continues to this day. Well, and like I said, it just depends on the day and the time and, what's the focus, because it seems to be that everything revolves around exacerbating the division between people. And it's very easy to do. These people did this in the past, and now they're doing this in the future. They could do this. Ah, yes, great comparison there, Albie. Yeah, like Mordor's army. The orcs and the fact that you had the Uruk-hai that were both deriven from tortured elves. Although, if memory serves, the Uruk-hai weren't they crossbred between the humans and the orcs? I'm trying to remember. I know, bad Aurelian. He doesn't remember the exact Tolkien myth. But you got to remember, I read a lot of different things every week, and I'm not infallible, contrary to what some people try to suggest. Oh, that's a good one there, Julia. Yeah, snakes do equal druids in many ways. And oddly enough, they're going to come up a little bit later in this exploration. Tower of Babel works, mixing species. Maybe. And maybe it's also in mixing cultures too. I mean, we don't know to what extent that's done by design or what extent that's happened naturally. I mean, that's really just a lot of guessing game. So, yeah, it doesn't exactly look like your traditional shield, does it, Chassis? Orcs and goblins. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you. I knew you had my back on that one. Appreciate that. So, let's take a closer look at this image. Yeah, it's kind of reminds me of I'm going back in the day here, the Nintendo Entertainment System game Rygar. What did they call that weapon? I'm trying to remember. It's been ages since I played that game. But yeah, unique weapons. Very interesting artwork on this. I mean, this isn't something that you tend to see. Now, either someone's got a really good imagination or they were inspired or a little bit of both. I do appreciate it though when people use their imagination to depict these legendary battles. And when you read this entire account of this great clash of the army of the king of the world and the Fianna or the Finians, it depends on how you pronounce it or how you want to say it. And believe me, there's many different ways to pronounce and say classic Gaelic or Irish to modern English, and people will always be giving you a hard time about the pronunciation, so therefore people don't talk about it, and it ensures that these stories are lost. So there you go, practice pronunciation, and people don't talk about things, and they forget about it, almost as though that were the design. But in some of the artwork you can see, it gives you a unique configuration of just how advanced these armies may have been, or maybe even something that was beyond what we would think of in our interpretation or understanding of armies. And I think that's another way that this myth is always spoken to me, at least in a particular way. Yep. And oddly enough, Albie, it seems that this is what inspired Tolkien in some ways. So it's a Wii controller. Good one, RB. Good one. Well, it's mentioned there, and it's mentioned in many other places as well. So it's not just in Enoch. I mean, it's prominently featured in there. You're absolutely right. But we also have to keep in mind that in many of the other origin stories, you have those concepts mentioned as well. So definitely you could say it's corroborating evidence, or as I like to say, corroborating evidence. So, ooh, look at there, Mr. Robert being Mr. Observant again. Yes, sir, you are correct. Look up and you'll see the portal. Let's take a look at the portal. Very interesting that they're showing a portal too. And it's not what we traditionally think of as the sun, is it? And then we have it looks to be almost an Entish figure here, going back to the Tolkien lore. Very intriguing. And then, the doorway down here. So, portal in the sky, and then the doorway down here. Kind of something that we see in many of the cathedrals or basilicas or the other structures that we explore every day. So, and remember, this is all just from the mind of one artist. And if you're curious to know who this artist is, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and post the link to some of the work so you can examine them on your own. And as always, I'll post it on the Reddit page so you can look at it and come to your own conclusions. But many, many different elements that are displayed here that make it very interesting. Ooh, yeah, could well lead to the underground. You're right, Old World Delaware. Well, RB, I am just a persistent individual, and I'll just attribute it to that. And maybe I have a little experience on finding very esoteric things. I spent the latter part of my career doing that. Yeah, no shortage of orbs. Kind of reminds us of the Battle of Nuremberg, doesn't it? Or the celestial event of Nuremberg, I should say, not the battle. Yes, indeed. Yeah, Lucifer was the morning star. Lucifer was also what they called the sun in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, the sequel to 2001. So more connections there. Yeah, I think so. The healing portal below. And you're right on that one too there, Robert, because the accounts of the battle were certain individuals who were injured. And you may hear some thunder in the background, so don't mind that. I'm still here and I'm fine. But interesting image, though. And it shows a lot of different dimensions to it in terms of what's going on. And here you're seeing a full figure of Daredon, the king of the world. Clearly an individual who did his own dirty work, fought from the front. Very interesting, though, with the way these figures are displayed, because, we look at the Babylonian figures, or at least the figures that we're told were attributed to the time of Babylon, and they look very different. And indeed, these figures look different, too. Almost as though these are a different kind of human being entirely. What are your thoughts on this one? Yeah, that's true. Cathars had a very interesting way of looking at things. Yes, it does just happen to be that name, Sky Sage. You are correct. And it allegedly has many other names too. I don't know why they don't call the Papal Auditorium something a little more sinister. I mean, it's not like anybody would call them out on it. Yeah, it does give that impression of Spartan, doesn't it? Before we saw that wonderful movie. At least that one was somewhat okay, but. Ooh, that's a good one. Statue of Liberty? Yeah, possibly. Ah, yes, Jamie. He does have scales, doesn't he? Let's take a closer look. Scales almost like a fish hand, oddly enough. The sword, or the gladius, whatever you want to call it, is quite intriguing as well. It's got two eyes there on the hilt and the pommel and the handguard, and then the design in the blade itself. And then all the shields having the same sunburst or starburst symbol on them, although who knows what that means. And then that's also in some of the motifs in the outer icon. Is this supposed to be some sort of crowned helmet, which supposedly the official historical Lucius Aurelian wore, although no one can confirm that. That seems to be something that was added later. We don't know for sure or not, but hard to say. I mean, how much of it's myth and how much of it's real? Yeah. My thoughts exactly, Sky Sage. It is rather bizarre. Ooh. Yeah, there is a bit of an Aztec mentality to it, isn't there, Texas Aggie? Good observation there. This is from the myth of Ireland, the old Irish myths. And I'll put the link so you can study and research it on your own. I didn't read up on all of it because, like I said, it's very complex and it's very textured and detailed. I mean, you can lose yourself reading it, almost as if you tried to read just Lord of the Rings over a couple days and then read all the ephemeral materials that Tolkien wrote. So these drawings are created in the last 10 years, but they are allegedly based on earlier drawings and earlier descriptions. See, the odd thing. Oh, you just had to go there, didn't you, RB? You just had to go there. That's okay. That's okay. I got something for you. So the odd thing about these images and these descriptions is that they've gone through many variations over the years. There's different people who have always revised what they looked like and what they were talking about. Yep. So it's really hard to say exactly what's going on and what's real and what's not. But, well, it's good to see you, Flat Plain, Oregon, and we'll see you later. So thanks for joining us. Yeah. There's all kinds of cool stuff in Ireland, Fairy Girl. There's no doubt about it. I strongly recommend if you have the means to visit it. And by all means, go to Skellig Michael too. You won't regret it. So we'll move on here. Let's see what else we have for images. The actual clash between the two combatants. And again, you're right. You do get some almost fish elements from this. I mean, it's very unique art. I mean, look at how the feet are formed. Really strange. Now, you could just say it's artistic license, but it really gives you the impression there's a lot more going on here than just a simple battle between two combatants. So is this supposed to represent Daredon and the leader of the Fianna, Finn McCool, or Fionn McCool? Many different ways to pronounce that name, too. Kind of reminds me of that statue that Worf had in his quarters, since I'll throw in one Star Trek reference. Yeah, that's a good observation there, Paulie. Yeah, air versus water. I can see that. Yep, no shortage of it, Old World Delaware. Lots of portals and dimensions. Battle of Wills. That's very true, Sky Sage. It definitely shows that. Alexander the Great comes up in many explorations and many accounts of the old world, and oddly enough is mentioned across all the major civilizations in some way, shape, or form. I don't know, Polly. Let's take a closer look. Yeah, it's almost like it gives you the impression of this taking place in the sea, and maybe this is another engagement that occurred earlier. But it's really hard to say. And then, of course, seeing the destruction between the armies here. Boy, they're really not holding back. Got the birds overhead. You know what that's all about. The other interesting thing is that all the individuals that are depicted, you only see blanked out eyes. And we might recall that when we studied the whole concept of Kroll or the doppelganger or the many other names that we have for it, the homunculus, not truly human beings, but maybe human beings represented in a different way, subverted human beings, the fallen. But official accounts of this battle from the myth, as official as they can be, state that it was a very bloody battle. The Fianna as a fighting force were effectively destroyed. And of course, Daradone's army, which was the army from across the world, was destroyed as well. So, not really what you call a happy ending. Really a very bittersweet ending. Yeah, Sauron in a way. It's a good point, Albie. Ooh, Mentant. Mentat. Yeah, I could see that. These make me think of the Anunnaki War that took place at basically the end of Sumerian tablets. And you know what? There could be a lot of truth in that as well. That's very true. 300 plus Shannon, or maybe much older for all we know. Almost as though they were a completely different kind of human. And maybe that's why we do think of them as giants. Maybe that's not just in stature, that's also in lifespan, that's also in capability. Hard to say, hard to know. Well, maybe that was just how they described something that was a much more advanced weapon or device than we know, something that was some advanced technology of cymatics or some combination of cymatics, sound, and frequency all together. And maybe that's what people saw, or they thought of it as lightning and thunder. Ancient Celts created a country called Nicrium in today's Styria. Massive old tunnels, many kilometers long and deep. Yeah, and we don't really know where else they were active. That's a good point. How far did they get? Where did this all go? Yeah, and definitely what you would think of as giants. I mean, there's no denying that. Now, this is some of the older artwork from the Battle of Entry, and again, just showing this to give you an idea of how it's evolved over time. And here you probably have a little bit more of the traditional view of what we would think of with Irish myth, or really any other myth for that fact. And then there's some really unique sketch drawings that show the entire invasion of the King of the World. And again, you see some odd details in all this. I mean, what exactly is going on here? Individual, some odd helmet. Not really sure. And then this is one of the more modern sketches showing the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann. The Fianna were having a very hard time against the King of the World's army, the army of cat-headed and dog-headed people. And yes, that's exactly what the myth calls them and refers to them as. They even have a commander of the cat-headed and dog-headed people. Will this discussion cover melted bricks? Well, maybe. Give me some time. We're getting there. Ooh, checkerboard garb. Yeah, as opposed to plaid, right? One of them. Boudica. And maybe that's also where there's a lot that's alluded to with Boudica as well in the resistance to the Romans, or at least what we think of as the Romans. Hey, Casey, thanks for joining us. And that's entirely possible too, Brian. I mean, can't disprove that in any way, shape, or form. Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, it does give that vibe too, doesn't it? Anyway, for those of you who are joining us, we're talking about the Battle of Entry and the concept of a king of the world and how that's still incorporated into our view of how the world is really run, whether you view it from a spiritual or a temporal perspective, we always think there's some sort of king of the world. Now, it just depends. Hey, Tara, good to see you. Good to see you, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, shell symbol. Isn't that interesting? Let's take a closer look at that. So again, you have the sun, but yeah, I can see it's also a shell symbol. And then oddly enough, the Tuatha De Danann almost looking like Valkyries, or anybody who decided to put wings on their helmets. Very, very intriguing. Chariots and powerful horses. And then another depiction that we saw earlier, the final battle between Dairedon right here and Fionn McCool. And Fionn McCool is quite an interesting Irish figure to look up as well. We don't really know a lot about Dairedon. He's only really mentioned in this myth, but there does seem to be some more context to him, and there does seem to be other allusions if you look at old stories, whether you're looking at the Babylonian stories that we still have, and who knows if it's really Babylon or what we think of as Babylon. Yeah, that could be where that account comes from, AR-715 Angel Armies. It does have a bit of a Viking vibe, doesn't it, Casey? Although maybe that's where our mentality of the Vikings came from, because oddly enough, what we're told historically about Vikings doesn't seem to conform to the capabilities that they would have. Although I got to admit, The Northman was a very well-made movie. Yeah, I'd put them up above the Spartans a little bit, Old World Delaware, but that's just me. Yeah, exactly. Old world art and old world style. Good comments. And there is something compelling about it. So I think if I'm reading these comments correctly, you'd like to see me post these on Reddit, and I will be happy to. Because they are very intriguing and they're unique, and it's not art that you see every day. And then here's a current image of Ventry Beach. So this is a real, authentic place in Ireland to this day. Southwest side of Ireland. And as stated earlier, Dairedon stopped at Skellig Michael and camped there. And indeed, there is a song by the Irish band Clonid that has Anya, however you pronounce it, depends on the day. Anya's older sister, Moya Brennan, was the lead singer. I believe they're no longer performing, but they do some really good traditional songs. And if you listen to the song Skellig, they actually talk about the king of the world resting for a while on Skellig Michael. So very, very interesting. Yeah, there's not a spot on that entire island that doesn't have some old world connotation to it. So, oh yes, Jamie, you are correct. That was a good song too. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, Albie. I thought he was all Scottish through and through, but it's really interesting how much I don't know. If anybody knows, go ahead and share. Yep, it's one of many good songs, isn't it, RB? Very haunting too. And so, in any event, we look at this whole concept of the king of the world, and we can see that it's from our oldest myth. And so that's how we think of the Institute. We think that the power behind the world is some kind of king of the world. Is it God? Is it referencing Jesus? Is it Allah? Whatever name you have for it. It could be all those things. It could be none. But just about everybody across the land has some sort of concept of one individual that's at the top of the hierarchy. And you can find it in many different myths. So, but anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. We're about to transition to the next part here, and go ahead and hit that like button, and we'll go to the next part. And I know it's the part you've all been waiting for: institutions and organizations. Ah, yes, this is where it really gets interesting. So now that we've established that we've had this concept of a king or a person at the top of the hierarchy, how does that go with our institutions and organizations? You know what, Adam? I really wish I could. I'd love to call him up on the phone and ask him what he thinks. I bet he has a pretty good idea. That's a good one, Old World Delaware. And everybody should be king, queen, emperor of your own world, whatever you want to call yourself. You make your own world. I completely agree with that. So anyway, institutions and organizations. Moving on. The Seven Sisters Petroleum. Now, I'm using this as an example of one of the great organizations. Now, the earlier Mad Max reference, this first appeared in the second Mad Max movie, Mad Max 2 if you're from Australia, Road Warrior if you're from the States or parts of Europe. And this appeared on the side of the big tanker in the film. And it alluded to this whole concept of Standard Oil breaking down into 7 major successor companies. And this is all the result of an antitrust. And you can see that Standard Oil, the original oil company, which, by the way, included Florida developer Henry Flagler. And yet somebody on the comments is trying to tell me Flagler was just a railroad guy. He had nothing to do with oil, although official history states he was one of the founders of Standard Oil. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that he's a railroad guy. But anyway, this is the big trust, and they were broken down into the 7 sisters. And so if you believe everything that we're told, and you know how I feel about that, then these are the current oil companies, and then you've got the other companies that came from these larger oil companies, and this shows how they're all related. Although, oddly enough, what do you have in this image? It almost looks like it's a hierarchical image, that everything goes back. In the military, you'd call it a chain of command, and Standard Oil looks like your headquarters. I'm just saying it looks like that, okay? I'm not implying anything. It just looks like that. What are your thoughts on the breakdown of Standard Oil and the 7 sisters and that whole concept? Yes, indeed. Founding members. Oh, thanks. Well, that beats Kevin Costner, so I kind of like that better. And you know what? Here's something we have to remember with these organizations and institutions. Is this something that's just shown that we're supposed to see and we're supposed to think? You know, are there 13 families, or are we just told there are 13 families? Those are the kind of questions we have to ask. There is some evidence. There's contradicting evidence. It's hard to say. Gee, I wonder why that is, Kathy. Why is Ashland Oil not on there? Rockefellers, Henry Flagler, a couple others, they were the original investors. So, and indeed, the very foundation of our modern civilization, based on energy, which we're told we have a petroleum-based society, right, wrong, or indifferent. And you look at the plot of Mad Max, and it's all about the collapse of that petroleum-based industry. Now, of course, now we can make the argument, well, we've evolved, we have solar power, we have other means of producing energy. It's important. There's a big debate about it. But what was really the point behind this? Remember, this is that questionable time, 1870 to 1911. All kinds of crazy things were happening. Who really knows what was historical from that time frame and what may simply be a story, if you follow me? Because we don't know. And like we said, how many people are alive that can even tell you that they firsthand witnessed events from 1900 to 1911? Very few. I had an ancestor. My grandfather was alive. Sure, but my grandfather's been gone for 20, 30 years. I can't ask him what the heck happened in the early 1900s. And even if I could, what would he remember? What would he have seen? I was on a farm out in western Nebraska. There's not much out there. We were isolated, you know? Although there's other accounts that he traveled. Yeah, that's a good point there, Sea Monkey Metals. I mean, that's what we're told oil comes from, so. Great way to put it, Heidi. It's a story. Not necessarily. I think what we have is a lot of attribution or assignment. You know, there's a reason that all this stuff is blasted in our face. But we're going to look at it. Yeah, and Sky Sage, did they actually know about the Napoleonic Wars, or was that stuff already set in stone and that was just another story? You know, I mean, Napoleon's quite an interesting character, as we're finding out. Yeah, although that's assuming that money is objective and money is the controlling force of the world. And a lot of people do think that, and they stop there. We'll get to that a little later. What we're told is only told so we can hopefully believe, so we can be controlled. Ah, what a wonderful, simple way to say it too, Robert. I'll have to remember that one. That's a good one. The real ones on top will never make... Oh, look at that, Polly. Look at you. Ah, yes, because if you have ultimate power, if you can influence everyone else, why do you need to make yourself known? What does fame matter if you can pull strings? Very wonderful and good point. Fossil fuels are found beneath the ground at a depth where no fossils are found. Yeah, that's true too, Casey. Who really knows what's found in the ground? I mean, we're told, but that's a good one, Julia. Petroleum is not dinosaur juice. Yeah, it's kind of a hard one to swallow. I want a nation of workers, not thinkers. Yeah, that's a common saying too. Hmm. Well, then we either call David Icke or I know we need to call Mark Singer. He knows how to deal with reptilians. Just go back and watch the intro to the VTV series where he slid down the front of the shuttle. That was hilarious. Even Captain Kirk didn't have a move that good. All right, so moving on. I'll get off my cheesy sense of humor here. Now, we go to the concept of organizations. Let me make sure I've got that back up because it should be up for this. So, a little scene here from Animal House. And if you haven't seen it, 1970s movie that is a wonderful comedy. And I strongly recommend you see it if you haven't seen it. It's good for a laugh. But what this film pokes fun at, and indeed it does through the two competing fraternal houses or fraternity houses, or however you want to say it, Delta House and the Omegas. And here we have the Deltas. That's a heck of a nice car, I got to admit. Ah, yeah, miss those days. But then they got junkers all around it. It's pretty funny. But if you've never seen this how, or if you've never seen this film, it gives you the concept of what fraternal orders are really about. And it's lampooning them. Indeed, it's in the title, National Lampoon's Animal House. You're probably thinking, oh gosh, I didn't see this coming. How is he tying Animal House into a discussion of institutions and organizations? Ah, Skull and Bones, yes. Was somebody just making fun of these organizations? Yeah, what are the Greek letters A to Z? Make sure you know. That's right, Bluto, John Belushi, Sergeant of Arms of Delta House. And several of these actors went on to big things. Hey, look, it's MacGyver's buddy in his younger years. In any event, though, the whole film, it's really just a parody. It's supposed to be a parody of what fraternal orders are really about. In other words, everybody's just having a good time. Nothing's really that serious. And then, of course, you've got the other side to it. The fraternity house that has money, that's very serious, the Omegas. And, of course, they adhere to authority. They're in with good old Dean Wormer. Love that name. Yeah, you can make that argument. It's hiding in plain sight. Man Beast. Yeah, that's a good one, Sky Sage. Good old Niedermeyer. Yeah, he actually fills a lot of military stereotypes as well, in addition to the authoritarian stereotype. Yep, give him the paddle. And you know what actor that was, right? You might know him. Before he got his way into Footloose. Good old Kevin Bacon. And for channel members, you saw that video that he was featured in, Murder in the First. That was an interesting time, especially in my academic career. Yeah, Dead Poets. That was another good example. A little bit more context to that movie. Not a hard comedy. Bacon and eggs. But you go back to this whole film and you look at what it's showing you, and it's giving you these different ideas and these different looks at these fraternal organizations. So you have the every people, the people you can relate to, the people who just want to have fun and are at college to have a good time. And that's what the Deltas represent. And then you got the Omegas, and they represent adherence to authority, having your old systems of societal hierarchy and making sure that you stay in that system. And I even remember when the dean talked to the president of the Omegas, and he said, put Niedermeyer on it. He's a sneaky little, you know what, just like you are. No, I'm not going to swear because I can control myself from swearing, but watch the movie. There's some wonderful dialogue in it. And then even this scene here where the new Deltas are inducted into the Delta House. And it's really just hilarious because it's a comedy scene, but if you're just looking at a picture of it, you kind of see how it could be poking fun of fraternal orders. Oh, look, he's wearing some elaborate headdress and he's reading from a book. It's so official. It's so esoteric. What's going on here? Yeah, that's right, Heidi. And that tends to go along with universities, just like alcohol does. At least that's the stereotype we're given. Yeah, that's a funny scene too, Kathy. That was a good scene too. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Kevin Bacon's getting whacked with the big old paddle. Oh yeah, the Stonecutters. Yep. And well, it was the water buffalo from the Flintstones, wasn't it? And that was kind of poking fun at these organizations as well. Yeah, but could there be legitimate hidden symbols? Yeah, maybe. Is it referring to cults or is it just poking fun at them? Are they serious? Or are they just things for us to laugh at? Those are the kind of questions to ask. Oh boy. Okay, okay, RB. Well, next time we do Old World in the movies, we'll do Animal House. I never saw that coming 10 miles away, but you know what? I think we could do that. Oh yeah. And you know what? A movie like that, it's amazing it got made in the 70s and it would never be made now. Really, it's amazing it got made in the 70s, so. Yep. Vernon Wells, great actor. And oddly enough, he showed up later in War of the Worlds as the very unseen. I mean, I think he showed up in 2 episodes, General Wilson. So Dean Wormer became an army general and fought aliens in War of the Worlds, the TV show. No joke. Well, you know what? We could do anything, but we'll just see what we got. All right. Its own exploration. Got it. We'll move on then. Now, this is just another example. National headquarters, and this is one of the organizations that used to be around in the past in Cleveland, the First Catholic Slavic Ladies Union, Fraternal Insurance Society. And of course, it's in an old world building. And even though this isn't a picture, what else would it be? And what do you think of that? Does this just seem like a very reputable organization? You want to go out there and take out your insurance needs or have your special union? Funny how it's the national headquarters. And the point behind this is there's many different organizations out there. uh, yeah, indeed they did. And maybe they got some help from the Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi, right? Because they could build gigantic buildings that took up a whole block. Oh, we haven't gotten started yet, Julia. I have a whole list of them we're going to take a look at here in a bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, Shannon. I mean, that's what we're told, but then when we look at things, their own organizations, lots of examples of queens that ruled nations, empresses, Empress Irene, and what we're told is Byzantium. It's kind of funny. Who knows? I don't know. It's just very, very interesting. Come on, Maxwell. Everybody needs a union. Everybody. But I just thought that was a fun little example because it's very random. And then you have many of these pictures from the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now, is this some sort of legitimate secret society? I mean, you can see no shortage of symbols on this. Ah, yeah. Or is this just some ridiculous costume party? What are your thoughts? Ah, this is getting really fun now. Oh, good one there, Shannon. Yeah, no doubt about it. The Union of Magicians. Yes, it does look like that, doesn't it? One of them. Are they all? Do you know? Ah, that's a good one, reality check, mate. Yeah, many different examples here. I was waiting for somebody to say that one, Old World Delaware. Yes, it does give some Crowley vibes, doesn't it? And remember our adherent of Aleister Crowley who showed up in our Carrington event exploration. That was quite intriguing, wasn't it? Hmm. That's interesting, Fairy Girl. It could be. Yeah, I haven't heard that one too much lately. I guess it's fallen out of favor. Can't imagine why. The Golden Dawn. Ah, yes, Sky Sage. Complete with names and everything. So, I mean, it depends on your perspective. Is this is this an esoteric set of costumes and people are trying to show their adherence to some sort of ritual? Or is it a costume party? How serious is it? Well, let's look at this image. Ah, here we go. It's like we've got the Union of Empresses here, or the Union of Queens, or whatever you want to say. Or is it just a sorority party? Hmm? Yeah. Well, of course there aren't any hidden hands. These aren't staged photos. Yeah, funny you say that. I think I do see Barbara there. Very, very true. Does anybody want to venture a guess when we're told this particular photo is from? You might be surprised. Well, that's a good one, Husker Nation. They actually show up if you ever watch the film Masada. They have quite a lot of influence in the film Masada. When Flavius Silva goes back to Rome. Yeah, you're not too far off, Old World Delaware. 1918. But could be later, could be earlier. That's just the research that I did. That's what I'm told. But, if you have a different time frame. Yeah, it could be 50s RB. Hard to say. Or 1930. I mean, I really don't know, Tracy. I wasn't there when they snapped the photo. Said 1918, but I could believe either one. I mean, the odd thing about this being a 1918 photo, though, is it's in really, really good definition. So I could see it being the 50s. But who knows for sure? So little costumage here, little costumage there. I'm just making that up because then we all remember our nice toga party from Animal House. And was that just a fun costume party? Did those costumes mean anything, or was everybody just looking for an excuse to wear a toga and have a grand old time? Before the alcohol, that's a good one. uh, yeah, and you know what? I mean, we think we know, but how well do we know? I mean, you might recall those photos that we have that are from the 1850s that show very clear images of water moving on the coast of France. So who knows for sure? Yeah, that's true too. But in any event, I always found that interesting though when you consider how costumes are used. I mean, somebody going to see this still from Animal House 100 years down the road and say, "Ooh, look, it's that time that everybody dressed up to show their reverence for name whatever secret society that you want to." Good to see you, Rob. Thanks for joining us. So, in any event, you also have these interesting markers from all the fraternal organizations that we had in the 1800s. Like here we have one from Iowa City. We've got a union member. Does anybody know what the middle one is? Zoom in a little bit more for you. Give you a hint. Cuba. What could that be referring to? Hey, thanks, Sooner West. I appreciate that. And welcome to the new members. Yeah, Civil War costumes, no doubt about it. Yeah, no one says it like Belushi, right? Toga, toga. No, not the CIA, but at the time they had this organization called the Grand Army of the Republic. It was supposedly for the Civil War veterans. Well, that would come later, Robert. This was 1898 when the United States Army went into Cuba. Spanish American War, the splendid little war, facilitated by the often mentioned President McKinley. Yep, you got it, Marion, the Rough Riders. So it was all from that time frame. But in any event, I think that's the last image I have there. We'll close on this one before we take a break, and then we're going to explore all these wondrous organizations. Does anybody know what these three rings represent and what unique organization this is? Pensacola early 1900 newspaper have 6 to 8 secret societies listed, along with their meeting places and time. You have no idea, RB. None of us have any idea. None of us at all, because we think we know there were a lot of secret societies in the 18 and early 1900s, but we're not even close. Okay. You all got it. Yes, the Odd Fellows. Who got it first? Tracy. Yeah, RB. I knew you would know. Paulie. Yep, it's the Odd Fellows. Now, what do you know of the Odd Fellows right now before we go into this further? 3 worlds, including the lands beyond the ice wall. Hey, could be for all we know, Cynthia. What were the Odd Fellows known for? Does anybody know? RB, you can't answer this, but does anybody know what the Odd Fellows were affiliated with in the 1800s? It's something we talk about a lot. Ah, yes, part of it. The orphans, they were also involved with something else. Charity. Ah, isn't that funny how that works out, huh? So they were extensively involved with the orphan trains, asylums, and workhouses, oddly enough, because there were odd fellows all over the place. And we like to talk about the Masons. Everybody likes to talk about the Masons or say that the Masons are behind everything. But would you be surprised to know that the Odd Fellows had a much greater membership? That they apparently had their hands in many more pies than we could possibly imagine. Exactly, RB, the asylums. And many asylums that we don't even remember to this day. Yes, supposedly they may have been involved with that too, Kent. Good point. Because that went so well. All right. Well, what we're going to do now, since we introduced the Odd Fellows, we're going to take a 2-minute break and then we're going to look at all of the secret societies that existed. Oh, give me 1 minute before we go on break. I'm in the Union and there are a lot of Freemasons running the shots. Yeah, at least that's what we see, Menace. And with the Union, probably. And indeed, I can think of those individuals being involved with academia, the military, but were they actually calling the shots? Depends. We'll take a look at it. But thank you very much. All right, we're going on break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Oh, and before we go on break, be sure you hit the like button. Please hit the like button. We're on intervention. See you in 2 minutes. All right, we are back. And thank you for hanging around with us over break. So we're going to go to 1800s fraternal organizations and give me 1 moment and we'll get that loaded up. And just let me make sure that you can actually see this. All right. Okay, can everybody see this? Fraternalism in America, 1860 to 1920. Now let's give everybody a chance to get back on. Doing the best I can. My time may be limited, so if anybody's wondering why I'm trying to be so productive, that's why. All right, good to go. Well, thanks for joining us now, Dwayne. Oh, okay. When my volume suddenly go up? Everybody okay? I'm not blowing your ears out, am I? I always claim these night groups are relatively new, but they aren't. No, this is true. And the Hells Angels. All right. So let's go back and take a look at these 1800s fraternal organizations, and we'll plow through this together. So get a little closer here. So, what we're told here in this little article, the American Civil War was an economic disaster. Yeah, right, because we had a second industrial revolution afterwards. Doesn't sound like an economic disaster to me, but then they say this caused two major depressions. Well, yeah, that's what they tell us. Remember that really nasty one in the 1870s? But hard times brought people together. By 1900, America had over 300 different and mostly new, so we're told, fraternal orders. Sears Roebuck catalog featured 80 pins, and these following numbers, taken from the World Almanac of 1896, shows the membership in the foremost fraternal orders of that time. And look at this. The Odd Fellows had 939,000 members, about 19,000 more than the Freemasons. So what are your thoughts on this? Yeah, that was one of them, the Knights of Columbus. So yes, it would seem that the Odd Fellows actually had more membership than the Freemasons. Again, if we trust these numbers, if we take them at face value, and remember, anything, especially from the World Almanac of 1896, is questionable. Depends on who you ask, Robert. Yeah, they're probably inaccurate. But what's interesting to me beyond the numbers here, Sean, is just the different organizations that they list. And we'll go through them here in a second. So I don't know. They could be on there, Dwayne. Maybe there's only, 12 or 14 of them. So possible. Or it started later or it started earlier for all we know. But yeah, that's a hard date that's considered in the theories. Odd Fellows, along with many other organizations, were all put in place to move folks around and confuse the masses. Definitely seems to be that way, doesn't it, Battlestar? No doubt about it. Well, let's look at what we have for some of these organizations, shall we? So we got the Odd Fellows, we got the Freemasons, we got the Knights of Pythias, however you pronounce it. Ancient Order of United Workmen. Boy, isn't that cool? I'm part of the Ancient Order of United Workmen. That's 341,000. Knights of the Maccabees. Has anyone heard of the Knights of the Maccabees? 209,000. Royal Arcanum, 169,000. Improved Order of Red Men? Isn't that interesting? Junior Order of United American Mechanics. Okay. Modern Woodmen of America. Knights of Honor. Here's a good one. Ancient Order of Foresters of America. 115,000. Now, back to that Irish reference. Ancient Order of Hibernians of America. 115,000. Has anybody heard of these orders before? We're not even halfway through the list yet, by the way. Yeah, I hadn't heard of a lot of them either. Yeah, this is true. Well, sure, if you take every number you see at face value. Yeah, that's what I thought. My grandparents had us Woodman insurance as a kid. You know what? That's a good reference there, Chassis. And something I've noticed is that in the traditional, what we think of as the southern states of the United States, there is more allusion to some of these organizations, oddly enough. Yeah. And I think that's where you'll see them there, Marion, is actually in the cemeteries where it's still designated. But I mean, we'd have no idea. And I really want you to think about that. Who were these organizations? Did they really exist the way we tell them, or have we practically forgotten them? So, I mean, we all love to talk about the Masons and say the Masons are behind everything. And yes, that's kind of cliche. It may be true. It may not be. It may just be misdirection. Hard to say, hard to know. But what's interesting is looking at all these different organizations, because a lot of us had no idea that they even existed. Woodmen of the World, 52,000. National Union. Oh, American Legion of Honor, not just the American Legion. So maybe a predecessor. Catholic Benevolent Legion. Order of Chosen Friends. Yeah, go join the Order of Chosen Friends. See what other interesting ones we have. Catholic Knights of America. Boy, I wonder how they flourished after that no-name party that didn't like them, or the, know-nothing party. I mean, it may as well have been the no-name party. Order of the Golden Cross. Royal Templars of Temperance. Boy, that just rolls right out, doesn't it? The Royal Templars of Temperance. They must have been big into temperance. New England Order of Protection. United Order of Pilgrim Fathers. Now, there is some reference to those organizations that continues. Here's a good one. United Ancient Order of Druids, 14,600. What happened to the United Ancient Order of Druids? I couldn't resist. Are they? Are we sure about that? Do we really know the hierarchy, or is it even shared with us? Yeah, if we go off of what's shared with us, you're absolutely right. Yeah, equal representation, no doubt about it. Let's start our secret society. It's the 1800s. What names haven't been taken, right, Sky Sage? Love the mask on that, Sky Sage. That's awesome. Just wanted to compliment you on that. Yes. But, again, who knows what the origin of it actually is? What did it really represent? I mean, these organizations could be completely different. Yeah, they have Lions Club in the US still, along with the elk, the moose, and several others, although many of them are supposedly in diminishment or in a downward trend of membership, to include the American Legion, although there's a lot of controversy about that with the United States military and veterans organizations. Yeah, trees are pretty nice. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, United Daughters of the Confederacy, Daughters of the Revolution, other organizations there. I mean, they're not even listing them all here. Yep. Veteran of Foreign Wars, Royal Organization of Truth Seekers, and then the unions. And so now that you've listed all this and we look at this and we see all these different organizations, these are the official ones. So 4 million people. But then additionally, Sears and Roebuck catalog feature jewelry for the following orders: Patriotic Sons of America, Sons of Veterans, GAR, Grand Army of the Republic. I have seen GAR in cemeteries, allegedly. Why do I say allegedly? Because it's hard to say what still exists in the cemetery that's authentic and genuine. We seem to think that when we see something in a cemetery, it must have been there back in the 1800s. May be true, may not be. Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen. Well, I guess that makes sense. Christian Endeavor. And then it goes on to say that 5 million significant when you have a country of only 75 million. And you might remember in the population video, we talked about how the population of the United States exploded from 1800 to 1900. Little 1,000% growth. Oh, there's a lot of different angles on this one up in the chat. There's a lot of different angles. You can see why work in alternative research is never done. That they are. And so what to make of this? What to make of all these alternative organizations, all these societies, all these secret societies that everybody knows about? Oh, this is good, Cynthia. I refused entry to Daughters of Revolution when they denied black people. My family oral history notes my family fought alongside a black man under George Washington in New York. It is interesting when you look at how these organizations actually run. In a lot of ways, it's like they operate by a different set of rules. And does everyone operate by its own set of rules? And if that's true, then who's really pulling all the strings? Well, yeah, JFK giving that speech. He also had Eisenhower giving a speech on the military-industrial complex, even though you can find other evidence that they had presidential executive orders that supported both secret societies and the military-industrial complex. So I don't know what to make of it, Paulie. Are they just acting like politicians and saying what they're supposed to say, or are they just trying to get votes? It's up to you to decide. Oh, yeah. And everybody is actually more aware of it. They do put it in the news. It's just there's a lot of news that people just overlook. Hey, Dallas, good to see you. Take care. Yeah, isn't that funny? Don't do as I do. You get that a lot, don't you? All right. So, anyway, that's 1800s fraternal organizations. But what you can see is in the 1800s, the early 1900s, there were many different fraternal organizations. that were listed, that were known, many of which have been forgotten. Order of Druids, Order of the Golden Cross, Chosen Friends, National Union, Sons of Temperance, Royal Arcanum, wonder what they were all about. Ancient Order of the United Workmen, maybe that's what became the Stonecutters for The Simpsons, huh? Now, the Knights of Pythias, we've seen some of their structures in some of the southern exploration, or I should say the cities in the south of the United States that we did. It's probably Knights of Pythias. I think that's the way it's pronounced, but by all means, correct me. Not going to bother me. And the Odd Fellows. So let's just say you've got these two. We'll take the Freemasons and the Odd Fellows because they have the greatest membership, about shy of 2 million, 1.8 million, over 1.8 million between the two of them. How much influence do they have? How plugged in are they to the apparatus that really facilitates the control or the governance of the land? Or are they really what they are? Just organizations that are there, you pay your dues, and it's just like that scene in Animal House. Larry Kroger, what do you think? Yay or nay? Yay. Yeah, we need the dues. Anyways. Yeah, well, there's nothing that's not odd about it, Reality Checkmate. I mean, everything about these organizations, and it's almost as though it's intentional. Even if there were hundreds of organizations, the people at the top was probably the same as the next one. Very likely, Chassis. And if you think about it, I'm making an analogy here, and I'm going to spell it out for y'all because I don't often do it. Oftentimes I allude to things and I hint to things. That's my method. But given how important this topic is, there's clearly a parallel between all these organizations and the way that you can look at how big oil, Standard, was divided. So if you go back to that diagram that we looked at with Standard Oil, compare and contrast that with all these organizations that we have. So, do you really have a hierarchy? Do you really have independent organizations? Or are they all tied together? It's a scary thought to think, Rebecca. It's a very scary thought to think. And then on top of that, with all these organizations we have, you also have to program in government organizations. Every government, every institution of government, every lettered agency in every government, and not just in the United States, but across the whole land. Because guess what? Every single national government is just as complicated, and in some ways, more so, less so than the United States. Yeah, that's a good one, Rebecca Brown. Power in numbers. Power in confusion. Au contraire, yes, you are correct. Follow the money. But that only works at a certain level. There are other levels. For example, what level can just simply type money and create it out of hide? Who has the authority to print money? Is it the government? Is it the central banks? Is it both? Is it neither? Does somebody else say when we're going to print the money? We think we know, but do we really? Maybe so, Jamie. Maybe so. I mean, if you step far enough back, it looks like what's the game they play today? So, for example, nobody would ever force, say, Microsoft or SpaceX or anybody to fall under trust laws. That just wouldn't happen today. Yeah, somebody remembers the video we did on that. Good job, Jamie. Yes, money is a mechanism of control. It's only one mechanism of control. Yeah, Eagles Club, don't forget them. You can even say the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, all those other organizations. They, oddly enough, have some, how shall we say, interesting origins. Thanks for pointing that out, Sheila. Didn't want to overlook that. But yet, if you step far enough back, you'll notice that a lot of these organizations have some very odd similarities to them. Oh, that's okay. You can say it because you're supposed to. Just like you're supposed to say that it's the Masons behind everything, or Odd Fellows, or one of these other organizations. You're supposed to say that. It's okay to talk about it. You're supposed to talk about it because that's what you're supposed to think. But you know what you are supposed to do once you do that? You're supposed to stop. Don't go any further. Well, here's where we're going to go a little further. So brace yourselves. So who really holds the power? And now we transition. Give me 1 second here. Stop screen. And let's get up our last series of images. Now, points if anybody knows what this is from. All right, can you see this? True. That's very true, AR715. I'm not going to deny that. Pay your dues on time. Yeah, that's true. Ah, are they? Or do we just think of them as such, Cynthia? Hmm. The usury system. Oh, yeah. Well, welcome, Inferno. I think Sooner West. You can thank Sooner West for that. So thank you for joining us. All right. Does anybody know what film this is from? Yeah, it's inspired by a tarot card. It's not actually a tarot card. Zardoz is in charge. Yeah, why not? Oh, you just holding back? False flags, maybe, or real flags. We may not know specifically, but we can come to some conclusions that give us a good idea, Robert. You are correct, Brian. It's from the film The Ninth Gate, and this specific card refers to virtue is conquered. And you might recall, well, I should say engraving. These were engravings from the book Nine Gates and the Kingdoms of Shadows. And yes, that film had a very intentional satanic inflection behind it. The whole point of the movie was actually having a satanic riddle to enable the main character of the story to connect with the Prince of Darkness. Although for channel members, we've actually explored what the Prince of Darkness may be. Back here, you got the wheel going on here. But these are interesting pieces of artwork, and there's a lot of symbolism in it, just like we just saw a lot of symbolism with all these organizations. Okay, so what's this have to do with who holds the power? This has to do with the fact that, yes, materialism did take over. It is a good movie, and you are correct, Floor. It was made by Roman Polanski, an individual who managed to elude the law in the United States. So, who does the law apply to and who doesn't it? Well, that's another question for another time. Maybe, or maybe something we think of as something else. The ultimate evil. Yes, Tabor. Are they hidden away in a big castle, or are they actually walking out on the streets every day? Which one is more frightening to think about, Polly? Well, I don't know. They're right there. Don't recall ever hiding anybody. I try not to hide anybody on the channel. It's not my doing. Your comments right there. So, uh-oh. Yeah, potentially some other influence from some other realm. Skeletar. Good one, Sky Sage. Hmm. For all we know, they could be. And then you're probably saying, well, wait a minute, you better not be saying that. Well, if they have this kind of power, then they already know that I know. So, mm, maybe, or maybe just another organization. I mean, there's so many organizations out there. What this really alludes to, though, is the conquering of virtue, or virtue is conquered. This is the defeat of the individual. This represents the individuals who do not accept the system that they are given. And as a result, they are conquered. That's what this engraving represents. Now, a lot of the engravings are glossed over in the film, but we'll get to the most powerful one. And the film is based on the 9 layers of hell. Now, oddly enough, there's many allusions to 9 layers of hell. They also say there's 6 degrees of separation. Where does that come from? Well, if there's 9 layers, there's actually 8 degrees of separation. So where does the 6 come from? Why is 6 such a prominent number? Hold on to that thought. Just look at this diagram, though. And who was it who supposedly came up with the 9 layers of hell? Does anybody know? To an extent, Sean, but not everybody is. Just like not everybody in the organizations are protected. They'll sacrifice people every day. Yeah, true. Can't deny that. I was waiting for that one, Dave. Yes, sir, you are correct. Or ma'am, Dante, disassociated randomness. Excuse me. Just saw the DR. Dante, yes. Dante's a very interesting character. May or may not have existed. Who knows for sure? But looking at the most disturbing of the engravings from the Nine Gates, and we're just looking at this story from Dante, we have the most disturbing saying of all: silence is golden. Silence is golden because if you truly hold the power, if you truly have the ability to influence all these organizations, all these governments, whether they're legitimate, whether they're non state actors, yes, that is an official term, non state actor, I'm not making that up. Silence is golden because if you have an organization that runs everything, the institute, if you will, you never speak of it. You don't have to speak of it. In fact, the people that serve it don't even need to know that they serve it. Now, some people will say that this is a reality breakdown. You'll hear Matt over on Quantum of Conscience. He has a lot of allusions to reality breakdowns. And there's a lot of evidence for that. But let's just suppose or think that there is an organization that exists on the basis silence is golden. Anybody can be out there walking around on the streets, anywhere in the land, and they could be part of it. And they don't even know it. Now you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, how does that make any sense? Because they operate under a different influence of power than we're aware of. There's some other means of controlling their actions. And then that comes down to the final question of who's really controlling it all. Yeah, maybe. Interesting enough, Sky Sage, they get called out quite a bit in James Clavell's novel Shogun and in the miniseries too. Yeah, Cobra or Cobra la 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 la, right? Ah, the fallen ones, Robert. Yes, our actions or lack of. Are they masked or aren't they? Hard to say. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Oh, you're not the first person with kids who's told me that, Tabor. And so finally look at it. If silence is golden, and let's just say, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to say that I don't know. I'm merely sharing my observations. Let's say that there is some group out there that does have the ability to influence and control many individuals. And now the next question is going to be, well, how would they go about achieving that? Well, you might remember this. Levels of awareness means a control. This is from the ancient enemy exploration. We are all very well aware of these levels of control. We're at least aware of level one. Everybody knows that money dictates a lot of our actions. Money is used as the carrot along with the stick. You can give people money to reward them for doing the right thing. You can deprive them of money to punish them. And indeed, in the third world, there was a saying in the 1980s from a G. Gordon Liddy character. Actually, it was G. Gordon Liddy himself. You might remember he was on Nixon's staff. And he said, in the third world, Spain is a second language. In the United States, money is a second language. Well, actually, money has now become the first language to many people. And many people say, follow the money. And if you follow the money, you'll figure out who's in control. Will you? Or are there other levels of control? Is there a level of physical control that we can't perceive? Now you're going to say, oh, you're getting into science fiction realm here. Yeah, maybe. But if you ever saw the series Babylon 5, they did show a level of physical control that was actually invisible. You might remember when good old Londo was afflicted by his keeper, an invisible alien parasite that controlled his actions. Or in that first season Star Trek episode, probably the best episode of the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, Conspiracy, where they had the neural parasite that controlled compromised Starfleet officers. Now, am I saying there's some kind of parasite out there? Don't know. Is there some other force that could be controlling actions that has a physical application on people? Maybe. And then what if you go beyond that? Level 3, spiritual or invisible control. So it's not just physical, you could also control people in other means. And are there levels even above this that we can't even see and we're not even aware of? Yes, it's entirely possible. Is there evidence of it? What do you think? Well, that's one way to think of it there. But there's many different ways to approach it. Ah, you're saying all of them. Yeah. Just read the comments on any one of the videos on this channel. You'll see all of these attempted to be employed. Well, because people like to live in comfort, RB, and they don't like to be wrong, and they don't like to challenge a system. There's risk in that. Yeah, and if you ever watch him even on Miami Vice, that comes across. That's why he was so perfect for that role. He showed up in 2 episodes of Miami Vice, and he's quite sinister in both episodes. A lot of truth on that show. Yeah, I do believe in Soul Trap, Sky Sage. I do believe in that possibility. And they could be, Robert, or maybe they're just another tool, some other sort of creature that can be used for what we would think of as good purposes to help people or evil purposes to control people. Yeah, that's another element too. Drugs as well. Now, just think about this. So, some final parting thoughts on this. If this has been going on for the entire time frame of all 5 eras, we've had these levels of control, then suddenly everything makes sense. The foundation eras with the civilization that we had in the earlier eras, and much like it corresponds to the classical Greek ages or any of the other ages from any other civilizations, they all say the same thing. Human society, human civilization, human beings were capable of much greater things in the distant past. Now, you could say that we can think of them as angels. Of course, we could. If we had human beings that lived to 900 years and had no physical ailments and had all sorts of wondrous capabilities to do things, we would probably think of them as angels. Were they really angels, or did they just have more advances in terms of a spiritual and physical capacity that we can't even begin to imagine? It's a possibility. Now, I can't rule out anything. I can't rule out if there was a single period of time and everything was great during that single period of time and then everything else around it was something else going on. I can't rule out any of the religious explanations for this. But from what I'm looking at and studying it as I have, all that we see throughout time is we seem to have a descendance or a decadence of capability, a loss of capability over time. And yet we're convinced that we're living at the best time. But the deception seems to be to convince us that the past wasn't actually a time where things were improved, at least for the individual and even an improved society or civilization. We're told, without a doubt, that the civilizations of the past, even the Romans, were corrupt and they were inherently evil. They practiced slavery. They needed to fall. Yet, conversely, we're also told that they had a great civilization. They could build wondrous structures through forced labor, but they needed to go down. They needed to be destroyed over time. That's what history will tell you. Yet, oddly enough, we have individuals such as Napoleon who we're told are relentlessly evil, but they have nice tombs and people tend to revere them. Oh, and he also had a very comfortable retirement. Don't forget that. So, what's it really all allude to? Well, if this has been going on for countless years, then how far has this control come? How much more advanced have these means of control really become? Because some force, some entity has been able to work on it for countless years. And it seems clear that it's maintained a continuity in its awareness. Now, is it some person? Is it some evil being? Is it what we think of as Satan? Well, that's up to you to decide. But there are means of seeing this control, and you can see it everywhere you look. But what are your thoughts on how it relates to the 5 eras? That's okay, Tia. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, quite possibly. Well, glad I could get it all out in one breath, Rebecca. It wasn't easy, let me tell you. Oh, thanks, Robert. Yeah, and that's kind of what it is. And I hate to say it, but that's the classified and bitter truth there, Sky Sage. And you know what? It doesn't take a violent revolution. It doesn't take anything of the such. You just need self-awareness and you just need to practice self-agency. Yeah, of course, people are going to laugh at that. People are going to say, that's not the real theme. And let them. Yeah, you and me both, Dallas. But yet many of the rest of us are convinced to doing that, depending what organization, agency that we're in. If you think about it, everything compels you to want to tell other people what to do, but it's not necessarily a natural impulse. Yeah, maybe. Dark helmet. Yeah, if only. Uh, Yeah, Med USA. Yeah, Rochester, Minnesota. That's an interesting place. Mayo Clinic, Med City, USA. That could be. No doubt about it. Well, for those of you who are here, just a reminder to hit that like button. We've explored the different concepts of the institution, the true holders of power. But what are your thoughts now? Is it all just this? It's an unwritten moral authority clause. That's the reason for doing everything or not doing anything. There's a higher moral authority behind it, but don't ask what it is. You don't need to know. Yeah, that seems to be a lot of what it is. And it's very simple tricks, too. Well, I appreciate that, Julia. Thank you very much. Yep, takes a little courage. A lot of it is. I mean, how much of it is really kayfabe? Natural event, artificially induced? It's still a good question, Fairy Girl. Still working on that one. Maybe both. Yeah, your personal health, and only you decide your personal health, especially your spiritual health. You decide that. Yeah, you got it, Sean. The 1-year plumber building. I'm still working on getting inside that. We'll see. Yeah, and in some respects, that's true, Adam. And if you read Leviathan with Thomas Hobbes, that's exactly what he suggests. Well, we could always be in those times, Tabor. I don't think it's a hard reset, no, but it's clear things are being rearranged in some respect, but they've always been rearranged. I mean, look how much things have changed since the 1980s, and whether you were around in the 1980s or not, or before that time frame, I mean, even the perception of how it stays with us. How do people view it? What was really going on? Well, I got to get caught up here. I'm way behind. Oh, yeah. And maybe that's it, Tabor. You know, there might be a lot more truth in that than we know. We haven't even looked at simulations yet. Don't worry, we're getting to it. Yeah, that's what it kind of feels like sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah, go back to 2014, just 10 years ago, compare and contrast how things are in 2024. And then go back to 2004. A lot of change. Hey, Crypto, good to see you. Hope things are going well. Yep, and I intend to keep going, Shelby. Probably when I finish building the airship, but I'm not going to call it the Albatross, Julia. Maybe I'll come up with some nicer name for it. It'll be a blast. Yeah, in some ways it was. I mean, even just looking at how the internet was different in the early 2000s. Now, of course, there's a reason for that. Well, because they say it was the renegade internet and crazy things happen. But I guess the best way to say it is, it felt like there was a lot more humanity expressed on the internet back in 2004 and before. So that's a good one. Yeah, and in the 1960s, I mean, different time frames. True enough, Adam. And constant revision. It's also made the process of revision much more rapid than everybody ever imagined. Sped up quite a bit. So now people can't even track what happened yesterday and what's said tomorrow. Well, that's okay, old world Delaware. It was a mutual decision to part, and one that I'm happy that I did. So, well, thanks, Cynthia. I appreciate that. Maybe it did, Heather. Can't prove that it didn't. And I would certainly agree. From my perspective, a lot of things changed around that time frame. Although maybe it just took a year or two for the effects to be felt, depending on where you were. I mean, who knows? There's definitely something odd that seemed to really change, but it depends on the person that you ask. And I don't discount anybody's individual perspective. There may be a reason why some people think it happened a little earlier, some people think it was a little later. For me, I noticed it probably about 12 to 13. I really noticed it in 13 and after, but other people say it's as late as 17. Just depends. Maybe, or maybe we're just told that it did. What is it actually? Or maybe it's something that we just found, old technology, and we started fiddling around with it. Got a nice exploration on that. Oh, I will, Jamie. I will. Rest assured. Because then we won't have any limitations. Well, and it's a lot more enjoyable to me. I'm not despising myself every day for what I have to do. Well, thanks, RB. I appreciate that. Well, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go forward with the books or not, Brian. I got a couple in the works, but there's another whole side to publishing, and yes, I've had experience with it before, and yes, I have been published in the past. So I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go forward with it or if I'm just going to continue with the way I do content now. I know some people are controversial about having a membership with the channel, but the only thing that happens with the membership is I don't ask for membership. People join because they want to, and then I'll provide them a little bit more direct, how shall I say, esoteric content just to give them something back for helping me out. That's how I see that. But everything that you see on the main explorations and these live streams, it's for everybody. So now if people want to try to deride that, be my guest, and people are going to. I don't care. I'd be concerned if people weren't trying to oppose what's going on. What makes you think I'm not already old? Yeah, I think it's one of the worst things in the world, Old World Delaware, just between us. You can contact me on the site Reddit. You can contact me on Twitter, or you can just hit me up in the comments section. And welcome. Thanks for joining us, Betsy Lou. Great. Now you're going to start that rumor, huh? Well, look, I don't look like Adrian Paul, so don't get that thought in your minds, all right? And by the way, I'm just going to officially say this War of the Worlds, that TV series I was referring to, they destroyed it in the second season like they do many other great TV series. But the best thing that came out of the second series was Adrian Paul. And really, he was the reason that the Highlander series was as good as it was. But anyway, it's all a matter of perspective, right, Dwayne? It's all a matter of perspective. Yeah, probably, Julia, probably. Who knows how many there've really been? Oh boy. Interview with a or interview with the, right, Rebecca? Yeah, that would make too much sense. Just like what was the name of the guy who portrayed Mark Antony on the Rome series? He was really good too. They were looking at having him be James Bond, but yeah, that would make too much sense. We need somebody who looks depressed all the time and hates their job. That's the James Bond we want in the 21st century or the 2000s. In due time, I will be getting east here, probably in the next month or so. I was going to do it last summer, but other things came up, and so I ended up going south. Yeah, no doubt. Oh, yeah, there were plenty in that. All right. Well, I think that's all that we have for this week, and this has been a wonderful exploration. I've certainly enjoyed it. So, what I'm looking at here for the last two live streams for this month, we're going to look to get into portals. And yes, that will include that organization or whatever you want to call it, that nuclear organization that we mentioned. And then we're probably going to look a little bit in depth. I want to do a live stream on the Napoleonic Wars because while Napoleon's a bit of a questionable character, there does seem to be something going on that was pertinent to how things lined up as we went on with time. So, anyway, well, thanks, Chassis. I appreciate that. And you have a great week yourself, Kathy, and thanks for joining us. Don't know, F in the chat. Indications that they are, or maybe it's just in our minds. Well, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. So, and just want to say welcome to the new members and thank you for the contributions and all the support. As always, I greatly appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed this live stream. And there are many different ways to contact me if you want to. Hit us up on Reddit or Twitter, or you can just comment on the channel page. I'll get back to you. It's not too hard to tell who actually has a serious question and who's just regurgitating talking points. So, anyway, I hope you all have a good evening. My pleasure. And enjoy the rest of your weekend wherever you are in the land. And this is Lucius Aurelian signing off.